KOCT, its board of directors, staff, and the City of Oceanside do not support nor promote any candidates. We provide the following program as a public service for voters. All candidates have been invited to participate in this program, but not all were able to or chose to do so.
Welcome to KOCT's 2020 Election Forum for the City Clerk of Oceanside. I'm Alison St. John, and thank you so much for joining us. Now, a little background, most cities in San Diego County actually appoint their city clerks, but back in March, Oceanside residents voted, about 75% of them, that they wanted to keep the position as an elected position. So we now have two candidates running for the position. Both of them are lifelong members of, they've lived in Oceanside their whole lives. One of them, Zeb Navarro, has actually been serving as the city clerk for the last 2 years because he took over in midterm when the previous city clerk left the position before his term was complete. This is his first time running for the position, and he is challenged by Laura Richardson BASSETT. So now we're going to start with opening statements for about 30 seconds each, and I'm going alphabetical order. Laura, why don't you start?
Thank you, Alison. My name's Laura Richardson BASSETT, and as Alison mentioned, I am born and raised here in Oceanside. I went to El Camino High School, went on to get my Bachelor's of Science degree in accounting at USC up in LA, came back, and raised my family here. I have 6 children who are all grown now, except one is going to be a senior in high school this year, is a senior in high school this year. I have been a real estate broker for about 14 years and a professional licensed fiduciary by the state of California. So I'm excited to be here and ready to serve. I'm new to government and I'm excited.
Thank you, Laura. Zeb Navarro.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Zeb Navarro. I am your current city clerk and I'm running for a full term. I am a lifelong Oceanside resident, and I have done a wonderful job at protecting the integrity of your public records and your election. This November, I am on the ballot, and I want to ask to continue serving as your city clerk. I bring 15 years of public agency experience to this position, and I hope to continue and serve as your city clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Zeb. So let me start by asking Zeb, you first. What does the city clerk actually do? What is the role, and what would you say is the most important function of the city clerk?
Well, the city clerk serves as the legislative services director for the city of Oceanside, helps the city council take minutes. We also serve as the city historian, the head document manager, and we also serve as the city's election official. Out of all of those, I think the most important one would be both, it's kind of a tie between the records management and the elections. As the elections official, not only am I a candidate, I'm also the elections official, but you have to be in charge of the election in this year's election. So I've actually had to process 25 paperwork for the candidates, except for the city clerk's race, that's done by staff, and also the 3 ballot measures that we have, K, L, and M. And with the records management, you have to make sure that you know where every piece of document is within the city of Oceanside. And we have a record center where we contain every single document from 1888 until today. In fact, yesterday I was holding something from 1888, the city charter. So those 2 positions would probably be the most important work of the city clerk.
Okay, thank you. So Laura, what is your understanding of the role, and what would you say is the most important aspect of it from the voter's perspective?
Yeah, so I have, the same information that I've researched on what this job entails, and I agree with Zeb that election is probably the most important part of it, because I think that there's a lot of distrust in elections these days, and in city government, in general, and I think it's important that the city clerk maintains a non-biased position in making sure that there's fair and open and transparent elections. So I would say that's probably the most important job. And I do think that the support of the city council, the historian, and all the just making sure that Oceanside is remembered, recorded, and available to anybody that wants to know more about our city, those are very important things.
Thank you. So now this is a part-time position. It earns about $25,000 a year, and so this is very much a public service position. So Zeb, I'd like to start with you. What is it that motivates you to be the city clerk?
Well, as an educator myself, I love to educate the public about the history of the city, but not only about the history of the city, but how to vote. And I've been doing that on my social media account at Zeb for Oceanside, just making sure everybody has the correct, accurate information about this year's election, especially because this is the first election where everybody's going to get a mail-in ballot. The education part and the historical part really is a great part of this job, but also serving the public as well. And working in the office, you deal with the public a lot. We're usually the go-to, the information booth for the city of Oceanside. And I just love enjoying working with the public, educating the public, not just on the history of Oceanside and the elections, but also keeping the public up to date on how the council voted by making sure that the minutes are published accurately.
Thank you. And Laura, so what is motivating you to run? What makes you think that it's important, that there's a challenger, and that you feel like it's time for a change?
Well, I would have to say that it's funny that you asked this question, because somebody basically told me this, this position doesn't pay a lot of money, and
right.
It is basically a volunteer position for the, so to speak. And I actually said I had never even entered my mind what they even get paid. I don't even know. I thought it was much less than that, actually. So I'm not doing it for the money. I am doing it to give back to my community. And my mom was in city council several years ago, and she kind of instilled that a sense of civic duty in me, and this just seemed like the perfect position for me right now to get started and contribute to the city. I think they're doing an excellent job. It's not to say that Zeb has not done a good job. I'm sure he's done a fine job. I just feel like this is where I'm supposed to be, and I'm qualified. I'm a fiduciary. I deal with people's important documents every day of my life, and I just want to continue that and give back to my community.
Okay, I'd like to stay with you for a minute, Laura. So you're saying that there's nothing wrong with the way that the office is being run now. Why should people make a change?
I just think that, well, first of all, Zeb was appointed, so he's never actually been elected by the people. So I think it's always important to have choices. And I think that having a choice on the ballot is important and gives people the opportunity to educate themselves about the position and what is involved. And I just think that they should vote for me because I really want to do this job. I want to do it well. And I feel like it's important for me to give back to my community, and I'm qualified.
Thank you. So Zeb, is there something about this job that is motivating you to actually run for a full 4-year term? Is there something you want to accomplish that you haven't accomplished in the 2 years so far?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm currently working on is putting all the ordinances and resolutions online for the citizens to research, search, and to look at the historical records online. Currently right now, if a member of the public wants to see an ordinance or a resolution, they have to file a public records request, and it takes 10 days to fulfill it while it goes through the review. These are public documents, and they should be available for review online, and anybody could go in and see how the council voted in 1976 about some bridge or some development or some zoning ordinance that they want. And I think it's a great opportunity for the citizens to go and look at how the council has voted, look at the historical records. And also just making sure that the public has a voice, especially during COVID. I'm the literal and figurative voice of the public at the city council meetings, and that's what's driving me to run for a full term.
So staying with you, Zeb, only 4 cities in San Diego County still elect their city clerks. The rest are all appointed, mainly because there are a lot of very specific skills. So this is an issue that came up in March, that some people supported the idea of appointing someone because then you can really pick someone who has the specific skills. How can you argue to the voter that you have the specific skills that is right for this job?
Well, when I went up for the appointment process for the city clerk position, I outlined my qualifications to the city council. And there was another candidate who was as equally qualified, and the council appointed me to fulfill the position. I have 15 years of public agency experience. I have an MBA and a Master's of Public Administration. I worked in a public agency dealing with unions and collective bargaining. I deal with federal agencies like the Federal Communications Commission and have gone to Washington, D.C. to lobby on behalf of Palomar College, and I work with a lot of students as an educator. I think with this election, the voters just need to look at the qualifications for the candidates and make the decision themselves on who would be the most qualified person for this position.
Okay, thanks. So Laura, what are your specific qualifications that really are appropriate for this job?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm a licensed fiduciary, so I deal with individuals mostly, very important documents. I'm held to a high standard of privacy, and also doing a good job to make sure that my clients are taken care of and that their documents are maintained. So I feel like that alone is qualifying me for the job. I don't have the extensive government background and public administration that Zeb has, but I do have I have been involved in various ways in the community. I worked with the Chamber of Commerce, I've been in Seroptimus, I've been involved with the theater company or the theater community for the last 15 years, and I've also acted as an administrator in those positions. So I just feel like I have the basic skills. I may have to learn some things about the city and how the operations work, but I feel like I have the basic skills to get the job done.
You mentioned that you are a fiduciary, and so you're working a lot with other people's money. Is there
Yes.
anything to do with the city's money in this job?
Not to my knowledge. I think that's up to the treasurer mostly. But I don't just work with other people's money. I work with their trusts and the administration of the trusts and the documents and the courts, and working with their insurance and their privacy and their documents. I work with all kinds of documents,
Okay.
not just handling their money.
Thank you. And staying with you for a minute, you mentioned earlier that this would be a good way to begin. So I have to ask you, do you have aspirations to run for other elected office in the future?
Not yet. I mean, I don't know. I know I want to be involved. I know I want to be involved in some way. Whether this leads to something else, that's really not on my mind right now. My goal is to bring some stability to this particular office. I feel like it's, since Barbara Regal-Wayne left, it's kind of been a revolving door to some extent, and I just want to bring some stability back to the office.
Okay.
So I don't know if I have, I could, but that's not why I ran, was so I could be a jumping board to something else necessarily.
Okay. Same question for you, Zeb. And of course, you did run for city council back in 2000. So are you going to be running for something else in the near future?
Well, I was fresh out of high school in 19 when I ran in 2000, and I learned my lesson. I have absolutely no desire to run for city council or for higher office, and I told the council that when I went up for my appointment process, that if you select me as city clerk, you're going to get me as city clerk for life. I have absolutely no aspirations, no desires to run for city council. I'm going to let the people that are crazy enough to do that run for city council, but I'm happy being city clerk because I feel that it's more in line with how I am as a person, which is an educator and a historian.
So why do you think that it's a good idea to elect rather than appoint a city clerk?
This issue was brought up to the voters twice, in 1976 and this year, and both times it has been soundly defeated by a huge landslide. I think when I was talking to individuals during the March primary, a lot of people voted no on Measure K because they feel this position is a watchdog position. In a way, it is a watchdog position, and you need somebody in that position, especially with the type of politics Oceanside has, that could serve as an unbiased, impartial connection between the citizens and their government. Some cities appoint their city clerks, and some have active city clerks. Other cities throughout California have city clerks that are only a figurehead. I'm a very active city clerk, and I do make sure the public is educated on everything city related, whether it's how a council voted, when the agendas are published, or something cool that happened in Oceanside that they should know about. And I think being in this position as an elected official, I'm offered that opportunity where as a citizen of this city, I could tell the citizens what's happening rather than someone being appointed that lives in Temecula or Murrieta that really doesn't know what's happening in this town.
Okay. So Laura, it's a nonpartisan position. Why do you think it's important that it's elected?
I think that it's, because I voted no on K as well. And the main reason I voted that way, not really knowing the intricacies of the issue at the time, I've kind of educated myself a little bit since. But the main reason I voted no was because I think, as Zeb has pointed out, it is important that I think it's important that the people have a voice. The people have a voice and they choose to vote for somebody versus someone being appointed that might lean one way or the other based on how the council decides they want the city to be run. So I just think in all aspects of local government, voting is very, very paramount to having an unbiased, transparent election and the way city government runs.
Okay, does it matter what the city clerk's opinions are, do you think? Does it make a difference to the job?
I don't know if it makes a decision. I don't know if it makes that big of a difference, but I do think that it's important that the people feel that the person in the job is somebody that earned the job, that earned it because the people felt they had confidence in that person. Because it is a non-biased, and it focuses a lot on integrity and transparency. And I feel like when people vote and they get what they get, they feel like then it's a stamp that they put of approval on that job versus just being appointed and not knowing anything about the person being appointed.
Do you have a comment on that, Zeb?
I think with this position, I have done a tremendous job at educating the voters about who I am. When I got sworn in, I started a Facebook page and an Instagram page at Zeb for Oceanside, joined all the Oceanside Facebook groups, made myself known to the community, appeared on KOCT to advertise for people to run for public office, and I have put myself out in the community promoting Oceanside, whether it's restaurants and businesses, just to let people know who I am. And now as a candidate for the office of city clerk, I'm putting myself out even more to let people know about my qualifications and to ask for your vote to continue serving as your city clerk. And I invite people to know more about me at my website, zebforcityclerk.com, or they could follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Zeb for Oceanside, where I'm publishing information about the elections, a little bit more about myself, and they could see the type of person that I am. And I hope that my time in office has shown people that I am impartial, I am independent, and I am unbiased. And I think I've shown that every step of the way from the election to North River Farms.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's just talk about who's been supporting your campaigns. Laura, who's given you the most financial support?
My mom.
She served on the city council.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, my mom, Colleen O'Hara, and a lot of her friends who actually are my friends. I haven't raised a whole lot of money. I've given myself a loan for now. I'm kind of a grassroots kind of person, but I do think I have a broad base of support from my mom, who's a former city council member, to Jack Feller, who's running for mayor, to Mary Gleesberg, a former retired educator, Camo Gleesberg, who's a retired military, John Wayne, who's retired firefighter. I feel like I have a broad base of support. I have people with my signs in their yard that have both one side and the other for other offices nationally and regionally. So I feel like I have a broad base of support from both sides. If you want to call it sides, but you know, we are in an election year of a presidential election, so
Indeed
there are
we are.
sides being taken.
Indeed we are. So Zeb, where would you say most of your support has come from, both financial and otherwise?
Just from regular everyday people that have donated to my campaign. I've had Republicans, Democrats, NPPs, Greens, American Party, everybody of every political spectrum has donated to my campaign. They have my signs out in their yard. Most of my support has come from my friends and people I know, former students, current students, work colleagues, and it just touches my heart because especially during COVID-19, not that many people have expendable income, and it's just a very great feeling when they donate $100, $200 to your campaign. Just say, we support you, feel free to use my name. George McNeil, Maricosta College trustee, has endorsed my campaign, and former city clerk Zach Beck has endorsed my campaign as well.
And just to both of you, have either of you had campaign contributions from a political party? Laura?
No.
Nope. Zeb?
I've had it from a local Democratic club, donated some money to my campaign, but I got money from Republicans and Democrats.
Okay, so now there's another Measure K that's on the ballot this November, which asks voters in Oceanside whether there should be term limits on the mayor and city council members. And some of our elected leaders have been on the council for 2 decades, as we know. Term limits would give them 3 4-year terms, that's 12 years max. Let's start with you, Laura. Do you support term limits for the mayor and council?
I'll be honest, I haven't really looked into that. In theory, I don't support term limits because I feel like an election is a term limit if the people still like you, but I do think there's reason to consider it because a lot of voters, and Zeb's, his job is to educate people. A lot of voters don't get educated, and so they need to when they vote, they don't really know what the person's actually accomplished or not accomplished. So I think there's good arguments on both sides, and I'll be honest, I have not looked into it enough to make a decision yet.
Do you plan to vote on it, though?
I'm sure I will vote on it. I just haven't made it my mind yet.
Okay. So, Zeb, what do you feel about term limits for Oceanside's mayor and council? It would not affect this position,
No.
incidentally.
It depends on the voters, and this issue has been brought up before within the city, and the same thing happens every year. The election is your term limits. If the voters feel that it's your time to leave office, then it's your time to leave office. And we've had council members serve 1 term, 2 years, 2 terms, 3 years. It depends on the voter, but as the city clerk, as the elections official, I have to remain impartial on all matters, including measures. So that's why in the old Measure K in March, I didn't take any sides. I was just the impartial figure saying these are the arguments for yes and these are the arguments for no. And the same thing for this Measure K regarding term limits. I just asked the voters just to educate themselves, look at the pros and cons of what term limits could do for the city of Oceanside. There are some positives about it, and there are some negatives about it. It just depends on who you talk to. There are some people that think the council members that have been on there for 20 years deserve to go away. And then there's others that think that those 2 council members deserve a shot at being mayor. It just depends on the voters' personal preference. I just asked the voters to educate themselves on the issue.
What do you think about your position? Should there be term limits on it? And do you think it should be part-time or full-time? Zeb?
I think there should not be term limits on the city clerk position. We've only had 8 elected city clerks in the city of Oceanside, and the longest term ever served was by John Landis and Barbara Regal Wayne, where they each served 30 to 32 years in the office of city clerk. You need somebody that's going to provide that stability in the office, and I think by not having term limits for the position of city clerk helps keep that stability and that leadership in that office. As far as it being a part-time or a full-time job, I could see it being a full-time job, and it was a full-time job up until when Barbara Regal Wayne left. And Zach Beck did a tremendous job making it a part-time job. And by keeping it a part-time job, you ensure that the person in that office is doing it for the right reasons, which is servant leadership and serving the community.
Laura, what do you think about being part-time or full-time and term limits?
I agree with Zeb. I don't think it should have any term limits because as I mentioned earlier, I think there needs to be stability in the position. And as far as full-time or part-time, I don't want to make that judgment yet because I don't know the intricacies of the job.
Okay. Just very briefly, before we go to closing statements, I want to ask you if you have a question of each other. Zeb, do you have a question for Laura?
In this position, just to warn you, you're going to get yelled at, either by council members, candidates, or members of the public. What steps do you take to handle pressure and to deal with everyday life of being yelled at by people you respect?
Yes, I understand. Being a mom of 6, I completely understand that. And I also ran a theater company that involved people of all ages and sizes. And, I feel like it's best to sit back and listen and not react immediately. So that's my best way, is to sit and listen, be a good listener, and listen to what they're actually trying to get across, and know that they have legitimate frustrations, and to not react immediately.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Do you have a question for Zeb?
I'm just curious, I know you're getting certified. When did you start that process? Did you start it before you got appointed or after?
I started the certification process the day after I got sworn in.
Okay.
I knew in the job description for city clerk, they asked that you be a certified municipal clerk. And when I went up for the appointment process, I told the council, you know, I meet all these qualifications except for this one. And I told them, if you appoint me, I will immediately start being certified. So the moment I got appointed and the shock kind of wore off, the next day I enrolled in classes and took all the classes needed to become a certified municipal clerk, and I'll be finished in February of next year.
Okay, thank you.
Great, so let's move to closing statements now. I think we'll start with Zeb, just reverse the order this time. Zeb, go ahead.
Since being sworn in as your city clerk, I have worked hard to ensure the transparency and integrity of your public records and elections. COVID-19 is some unprecedented times, and we need stability and leadership in that office. I feel I have shown that stability and that leadership during this time. I ask that you allow me to continue serving as your city clerk, and I invite you to visit my website at zebforcityclerk.com and follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Zeb for Oceanside. I want to hear from you, and I hope I can earn your vote this November.
Thank you, Zeb. And Laura, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not as experienced as Zeb, but I am experienced in my life, in my job, and my community, and I hope to serve you in the position of city clerk. You can check out who I am, more about me, at BASSETTforClerk2020.com. And I hope that you entrust me with the job of city clerk, knowing that I am unbiased, professional, and I feel like I can bring transparency and integrity to this position. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank both of you very much for being part of this forum and for being willing to run for public office. And I'd like to thank all of you who've been watching, and I highly encourage you to go to the KOCT website to find candidate statements, not just for this position, but all the positions in the city of Oceanside. I'm Alison St. John, and thanks for watching, and remember to vote.